As a fellow graduate of the University of Hull, our next speaker has an innate understanding of this wonderful, wonderful city. Her extensive career has seen her in the role of journalist, of broadcaster, of theatre critic, and more recently, novelist. She is currently chair of Hull City of Culture 2017, and she'd like to speak to us tonight about getting out of our comfort zone and embracing change. Ladies and gentlemen, another huge warm welcome, please, for Rosie Millard.
I want a nice little microphone so I can bounce around like Martin, but of course I haven't got one. There we are. Thank you very much, and good evening. I would like to start by telling you what the 3 newest words in the Oxford English Dictionary were this year. They're all acronyms. Sorry, Martin. They are LOL, OMG, and WTF. And I think that's quite interesting. They are all expressions of shock and awe, to be honest, and hilarity. Because it's been quite a shocking year, and it's been a year where we have all had enormous change. I mean, there was one sort of series of 5 weeks where every time you looked at the television, another leader of a political party had collapsed, stepped down, been re-elected, or whatever. You know, it was monumental change. And it was very frightening, because it was change without quite knowing where we were going, and that is terrifying if there's change without an obvious goal in sight. We're sitting here beside a monument to Charles Darwin, and when he brought along enormous change by his explorations to the Galapagos Islands, people thought the world had come to an end. And in journalism, and this is classic, I always do this, I always agree to do a talk on something, and then I decide to talk about something else, and I look at the programme, and I realise I'm meant to be talking about something completely different. That happened tonight. It wasn't as bad as one do I went to. I didn't know I was going to talk at all, and I was suddenly asked to stand up and talk about the effects of 9/11 on the art market. That was a bad moment. And I just thought, well, I'll just get up and say anything, and people sort of buy it. If you just say anything with conviction, it sort of works. Yes, no, I saw in the programme, I was talking about the collapse of the print industry. I mean, that is enormous change. That is, a friend of mine likened it to us hacks writing basically with quill pen on vellum, and suddenly the printing press arrives. I mean, that is what we are undergoing at the moment. With the arrival of the internet. It is and no one knows quite how to cope with it, and it's very, very alarming, it's very frightening, and it's very insecure feeling. But I don't want to talk about frightening and horrid things all night, and I'm sure you do not want to hear about journalists moaning about their lot, because quite honestly, we have a jolly nice life, and it's a great job, given all that. So I'm going to talk about enormous change which is planned, which is desired, and which there is an overarching vision. And ladies and gentlemen, you are sitting in a city which is experiencing just that, and it is absolutely wonderful. I'm now going to try this gizmo here. I'm not a Luddite, but I hope it's going to work. I'm going to press it twice, and just to give you a little taste, particularly for people who don't live in Hull, to see what's been happening over the last 2 or 3 years. This should be the video. I have pressed it twice. Oh. happening. Today on the train, I sat next to a woman who is playing the violin tomorrow. She's playing Gershwin at the Middleton Hall, which has been rebuilt into the most innovative and technologically advanced concert hall in the north of England. And tonight, just before coming here, I had a meeting with our wonderful CEO, Martin Green, in Butler White's, in Humber Street. Humber Street has been completely rebuilt. Butler White's is a new institution. These things didn't exist 6 months ago. They certainly didn't exist 6 years ago. I mean, Hull is undergoing an absolutely colossal change, and it is obviously, the catalyst is the City of Culture. The capital, the whole notion of cities and capitals of culture wasn't first engineered towards change. They were really invented as a sort of little signpost for extra tourism, really. They were invented back in the 1980s by the Greek Minister of Culture, Melina Mercouri. And the first one went to Athens, and the second one went to Paris, and the third one went to Florence. And they were given to cities that didn't need them, and they were just a reaffirmation of what we all know, which is that these places are lovely to visit and there's lots of culture going on. And then in 1990, the award was given to a city which absolutely astonished everyone for really having the nerve to even apply for it. And the applicants sat in a little room in this city, and they thought, we're going to apply. And they dreamt up a fantastic slogan, and they dreamt up a fantastic programme, and they applied, and they won it, to the amazement of the whole of Europe. And that city was Glasgow. And it absolutely transformed the city. It set Glasgow on a track, on a trail, that effectively culminated, I would say the story isn't over yet, but it culminated in Glasgow hosting the Commonwealth Games. Such a thing would never have been thought about, never dreamt of in the 80s, when Glasgow was a sort of byword for deprivation and despair. But Glasgow took the initiative and turned itself around with the help of the springboard of the Capital of Culture. And ever since then, each Capital of Culture, which is a European thing and a European initiative, has been given to a city that desires change. And it has been so successful. Liverpool, as I'm sure you know, won the Capital of Culture in 2008. It's believed that Liverpool, with a budget of £100 million, made in that year £800 million, and has since had an economic growth worth £2 billion for Liverpool, having been the Capital of Culture. And it was so successful, it's been so successful, that about 6-7 years ago, the Secretary of State for Culture, who was then Andy Burnham, invented a sort of small sister for the Capital of Culture, which was a City of Culture, a UK City of Culture. So to take the initiative of the Capital of Culture and apply it to a UK city. And the first one that won it was Derry, Londonderry, which overcame extraordinary division within the city. This is a city which has had civil war, effectively, for a long time. Really overcame that to produce a wonderful year and a lasting legacy. And then Hull won it. And it won it really because the whole city wanted it. And this is the thing about change. And as an arts correspondent, as an arts journalist, I've often been asked to go and cover places which have used culture to initiate change. It became known as a shorthand as a sort of Bilbao effect. When the Guggenheim Bilbao was built by Frank Gehry in the city of Bilbao, it achieved a monumental change in the incomes and fortunes of the city. But in some cities, it just didn't work. Largely, in some parts of the city, it's been tried in bits of London. I'm not referring to the Olympics, but other things, other rather less well-crafted, less well-thought-out change, just by bunging in a sculpture or bunging in a theatre or bunging in an arts festival or a large gallery done by a sexy architect, hasn't really worked because it wasn't required, it wasn't desired by the entire community. And I sort of disagree with Martin when he talks about speaking to a preferred few or a powerful few who will then go on talking to a few. Actually, the bid in Hull came from everyone. And that is why we won it. It was not a bunch of celebrities on a red carpet. It was about a huge desire for change from the community. You really have to want it. And I sort of ally this to a marathon. I'm a marathon runner. And to say that, to think of myself when I was in my 30s or my 20s, when I was basically a drama student in Hull, smoking and drinking, just lolling around, really. To say that, I'm a marathon runner would have been unthinkable. But I was asked to run the London Marathon in 2008 by the Times newspaper. And I'd always quite sort of admired the London Marathon when I saw it on television. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. But it was a massive change. It was a massive cultural change for myself. And in the same ways, you have to have a complete whole has to desire the change. If you're going to run a marathon, you have to desire it every single day. You can't just desire it on a Thursday. You have to desire it on a Friday morning, on a Sunday morning. You have to desire, you don't run every day, obviously, but you're always thinking about it and droning on about it every single day. You have to want it with every element of your body. This being the most important one, much more important than your feet, actually, or your legs. This is what helps you. This is what makes you run a marathon, as anyone who's ever run one will know. And it is hard. It is really hard. But it wouldn't be worth doing it if it was easy. And this is the great thing about change. If you're going to change something, change is hard, it is scary. But you keep the goal ahead of you and it is worth it. Anyone can run 20 miles, but running 26.2, it requires a bit of a kick. You really have to want it. And you have to have stratagem. You have to have time and you have to have stratagem. So you have to have about 4 or 5 months to train for a marathon, and you have to have about 4 years to really get ready for the City of Culture. And for a long time, we really did annoy everyone in Hull because we just went very, very quiet. I was the first employee of the Culture Company, and Martin Green, our brilliant CEO, was the second employee. We now have 80 employees, and we were very, very quiet for the first 2 years because we were scoping the city, as my new vocabulary now informs me. I've got completely new vocabulary. Journalists don't speak about scoping, they don't speak about stakeholders, they don't speak about vision, all this sort of thing. Anyway, I now do all this. So we were very, very quiet, and we were just bedding down and finding out, because it would have been easy for Martin, he did the opening and closing of the Olympics, and he did the torch relay. It'd be very, very easy for him to just open his fantastic contacts book and just dream in. There's nothing about fireworks that Martin Green does not know. It would be very easy for him to just book people and bring them in. But again, that's not what change is about. It's not just plastering things over. Actually, funnily enough, you're talking about the military. I have to tell you this thing about Martin, which is very funny. He was planning the torch relay, which, as you know, is about, the Olympic torch had to go through every single borough in the UK. So everyone. And so A, it had to go through all the boroughs. B, all the boroughs had to pay for it. C, nobody wanted to because the Olympics was going to be a disaster. So he had to persuade all these people, all these boroughs, to take this enormous bandwagon with the torch and people running beside and and it was difficult. And he suddenly thought, the arts community is not going to be able to cope with the torch relay, with hosting the torch relay, with dealing with this torch relay every single day, because it ended with a sort of show that night. And he thought, I know, I'll get retired soldiers to do it. And they were absolutely brilliant, sort of ironing underpants people, they're people who love kind of synchronize your watches and be here and stand back and get behind fences and barriers and dealing with the whole thing. And they were absolutely brilliant, and the whole thing worked like clockwork because they worked on precision, exactly as Martin was saying. They had that sort of mindset and that culture, and they brought that culture into a creative world, and it was a very, very happy and successful union. And as we all know, the torch relay and indeed the Olympics were a triumph. So you have to have stratagem. My stratagem for running, I'll tell you, it is basically putting your clothes out the night before. Because the night before, you're all full of, good ambitions and good aims and everything for the morning. And so you think, okay, I'm going to go for my 8-mile run tomorrow morning. Put your clothes out, put your shoes out. I have never not run when my shoes and clothes are out in the morning. If they're out the night before, because the shame, the inner humiliation of putting your stuff away is just too dreadful to even encounter. So you've got to put your shoes on. And once you've got your shoes on, you might as well go for a run. And when you're literally 4 minutes into the run, you think, oh, this is fantastic, because, of course, it's the preparation, which is so terrifying. So preparation, and as you've seen there from that film, the preparation Hull is undergoing is considerable and profound. The City Council, who are absolutely, I will not hear a word against, they won the bid for Hull, and they are putting £80 million into changing the city of Hull. And they are preparing it for us to have a fantastic show. They are increasing the capacity of the theatres, they are rebuilding the ferens, they are changing the public areas and the public ground, and it is going to be a wonderful showcase for a brilliant year. Encouragement. Everyone needs encouragement, and you really do need encouragement if you're going to make change. I mean, it's very important to have your fan base along the road when you're running the marathon. And when I was running the marathon, I've got millions of children, and they all failed to see me in London. I mean, I've run lots of marathons all over the place, and they don't come with me at all and watch me because it's so boring. But they did come to London, and I failed to see all of them. And I was sort of plodding along at mile 24, and I suddenly saw my dad, who is 80, well, he's now 85, I mean, this is ages ago, waving. I was like, oh my God, my father. So it's really important to have encouragement. And here in Hull, we have enormous encouragement from the City Council, from the Treasury, from the Arts Council, but also from the private sector. Siemens, you've encouraged us. KCOM, you've encouraged us. All our fantastic partners, Yorkshire Water, BP, Arco, given us the uniforms, brilliant uniforms. Again, if you're going to have change, you have to look like you're going to change. There's no point in going out and running a marathon in a silly cotton shirt and shorts, although actually Ron Hill used to, if anyone is a runner, they'll know Ron Hill. He used to run in a string vest, and he ran 2:10 in the marathon, so, it's not that bad, but anyway, that was years ago. So you have to be encouraged. And one of my strategies when I started running marathons is to have a calendar. I have a calendar in my office, and I'd come back from my run. I'd write in my mileage on that calendar, and that tiny act of writing a number like 4 or 10 or on a big day 18 or whatever, that weirdly drove me to run for 3 hours. You would have thought that the enormity of running for 3 hours along the Regent's Canal would be over, but no, actually the important thing was writing the thing at the end, writing the number, and then feeling pride about writing the number. So stratagem are really important, and it's very important to stick to them. The reason why those numbers are so important is because they show your progress. And they show your continued focus. And this year, we had 2 things which showed our progress. One was the Place des Anges in Queen's Gardens, and the other was Spencer Tunick. I don't know if anyone here took their clothes off for Spencer Tunick and painted themselves blue. But that was an amazing event. And the Place des Anges, with 3 tons of feathers being dropped on Queen's Gardens. And the reason why they were so brilliant, those events, is not only did they show us how our online ticketing worked, and they showed us how our volunteering worked, and they gave us a chance to really work with the council and to show that we could use Hull as a brilliant platform for wonderful events. But they worked because they prepared the world for change. And, I'm a hack, I'm a media lovey, and I understand I read newspapers in a way that none of you will read newspapers, because I just look at how, first of all, I look at who's written the story and think I should have written that story, but also I look at how captions are delivered. And I looked at all the Spencer Tunick photographs, which went to Australia and America and all over the world. And the photograph basically was a big photograph of naked people, in blue naked people, with a wonderful backdrop of the Scale Lane Bridge or the Guildhall or whatever. And the caption just said, Spencer Tunick, Sea of Hull, 3,000 naked people in Hull, Hull City of Culture 2017. That was basically it. It was nothing about Hull, depressed city, Hull coming out of the darkness, Hull, terrible, this, that, the other. No gloom and doom. It was a different story. It was a completely different story. And then when we had the launch, which was in just at the end of September, all my former colleagues, and I still work with some of them, arts hacks. It was a bit like being at my funeral. Not that all my colleagues would come to my funeral, but anyway, it was like seeing my sort of former life pass before me, because all these journalists came up. And they all, it's very tempting when you're a journalist to write the story in the office before you leave. You think, right, I know Hull is rubbish, this is going to be a disaster, la la la, or so we'll have a disaster story like people have for the Olympics, or we'll have a story of like a sort of successful arc, Hull coming out of nothing. Actually, it was none of that. They came up with really positive faces because they'd sort of had their minds changed because of the preparation they'd done. There was change, there was a change story in them. A, because we'd had Spencer Tunick et al., and B, because they also came with people like Nick Sirota and Tony Hall. And if Tony Hall is standing on a stage saying, Hull is brilliant and we love it and we're going to put it on the weather map, you have to be quite a brave journalist to say this is going to be a disaster. That's, again, what is important about support, and support from people who count. And if Nick Sirota is standing there saying the tape gives Hull huge support and belief, I don't know any arts journalist who's going to fly in the face of that, because he's so powerful. So you have to look the part, you have to have supporters, you have to have stratagem, and you have to have a goal. Of course you do. Your goal, that is where the Brexiteer lot fell apart. That is why UKIP has fallen apart. I mean, not that I'm really too sad about that, but because they didn't know what they were doing after winning, because they didn't think they were going to win. Their push for change has sort of blown up in their face because they don't quite know how to deliver it, and it's up to Theresa May and the government to deliver it. Well, that's okay. The public mandate has happened, but there wasn't a precision. We have a precise goal for change at Hull City of Culture. We have KPIs, again, not a word that I normally use, but actually it's jolly useful. We are going to engage 65,000 children and young people, the children and young people who live in Hull. And we are going to, this year and the following year and years hence, this event is going to be life-changing, particularly for young people in Hull. And if it isn't, well, we will have failed. And we're not going to fail. We have other aims, ambitions about people coming into Hull, the media change in Hull, in the character of Hull. These are all happening. Particularly though the young people, the effect of the change on them is so crucial, because they will be given a chance that they haven't had before, and it's completely important for them to see that chance, to take it, and to be encouraged onto new visions, new worlds, and a new beginning. So it's a bit like when you're running the marathon. I've just run the Chicago Marathon last week, and I was so nervous about running this marathon. I mean, I've run marathons on the Great Wall of China, I've run them in Berlin, all these different places, but every time I come to it, I'm terrified. And actually, I was so terrified this time, I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to give this speech because I'm meant to be talking about marathons. I thought, oh, blimey, it's too frightening. Anyway, I sort of managed to get to the start line. And when I started running, all your fears go away because you've already started. I'm going to read an inspirational. This is the sort of thing that marathon runners think about. This is by somebody called Joe Henderson. You also need to look back, this is during the marathon, not just at the people who are running behind you, but especially at those who don't run and never will, those who run but don't race, those who started training but didn't carry through, those who got to the starting line but didn't get to the finish line, those who once raced better than you but now no longer run at all. You're still here. Take pride in wherever you finish. Look at all the people you've outlasted. So you do run along and you see people holding up signs like, pain is temporary, the internet results are forever, and you're nearly there. Or I was doing the Hackney Half Marathon once, and I ran past somebody who held up a sign saying, "Kevin, I'm pregnant," which is just very, very, very funny. So, but most of all, you think about the medal. You actually physically think about holding the medal. I've got a brilliant photograph of me holding the medal in my teeth, and I wanted to put it up here, but I couldn't. Anyway, it's a good photo, and you dream about holding this medal, and you think, right, one of the marathon runners I was running with, he said, you've got to get an old woman giving you the medal, because when you get to the finish line, which is a life memory, I can tell you, it is a life moment. Reaching the finish, I don't care how many marathons you've raced, it's always amazing. And the best one completely is Berlin, because you turn around a corner and you run 25 miles. You're quite tired. You turn this corner, you run up the Unter den Linden, and in front of you is the Brandenburg Gate. And the Brandenburg Gate is the finish line. And it's such a symbol of division in the city. It's such a symbol of so many things. Everyone's crying. It's amazing. Anyway, there is a whole lineup of volunteers waiting to give you this medal that you have thought about for the last 4 hours or however long you've been running. And so you have to choose an old lady or an elderly lady, because they give you such great hugs. And they go, "Oh, well done, darling. Congratulations." Oh, there's all tears, and it's good. But it's very important to have that in your head while you're running. So it needs to be precise. You need to have a goal. You need to be precise. You need to think of the 65,000 children whose lives will change. You need to think about the medal. You cannot just think, I'm going to do something and afterwards, I don't know, like Nigel Farage. And afterwards, you'll want to do it again. You'll want to do it bigger. You'll want to do it more. You will be so inspired by the fact that you did something which was tough. Because if it isn't tough, it's not worth doing it. And you changed in order to achieve it, and you achieved it. And it was rather amazing. I went up to Glasgow about a year ago to do a story at the Citizens Theatre, and I flew up and I got off out of the plane. I got in a taxi to the city, and I jumped in this cab. And as we drove through, Glasgow looked pretty impressive, and I said, "Wow, Glasgow looks pretty impressive," to the driver, who didn't know who I was or anything. I wasn't wearing my badge or anything like this. And he just said, "Yeah," he said, "it was the capital of culture. That's what started it." And I just thought, that is amazing. 25 years later, he is talking about a phenomenon that happened that changed an entire city. And just today, I was talking to Martin, and he said that Liverpool, capital of culture in 2008, is going to bid for the Commonwealth Games, to bid to be Britain's host for the Commonwealth Games. And, their ambition hasn't left them. And who knows? Maybe the Commonwealth Games will come to Hull. If so, you heard it here first. Thank you very much.